Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Happiness Happens. I'm Simona, host of the show, and today we have a very powerful conversation for you. My guest today is Eric Fong, and you are going to genuinely really like this conversation. So, you might not know this about me, but I have a huge fascination about the law and criminal law and lawyers and law shows and just all of the above. I actually, before I went to college for public relations, which is the program that I did, I was in a criminology program and I had the idea of working as a lawyer or in the law somehow, in some capacity, in some way. So today's conversation was a really interesting one because Eric and I talked about the law, how it works a little bit, but also the discrepancies and the gaps and the holes, and how this can actually really severely impact someone's happiness and their life and the way that they show up in their life and the way that they heal and the way that they grow. Eric also shares his challenges that came with addiction, including relationships, financial difficulties, and the risk of losing his career that he spent so much time and energy building out. And we talk about maintaining sobriety. We talk about recovering from addiction and how he built a practice now that created this incredible level of success for him. So Eric has more than 25 years of experience, and he's one of the top trial lawyers in the US with over 100 plus high stakes civil and criminal cases argued to verdict both before juries and courts of appeals. His path to success was not without challenges. After his wife decided to leave him and take the kids, Eric struggled for years with a severe alcohol and marijuana addiction. Despite his success in the courtroom, he became a recluse and stopped accepting cases as a result of his addiction, which took a toll on his personal life and destroyed his practice. He repeatedly promised himself that he wouldn't drink or smoke weed again, and he would exercise and eat healthy and be there for his children, but these promises would only hold for a few days before he relapsed again. On realizing that he was becoming very paranoid, reckless, and was going to die, Eric sought help and he tried various forms of therapy, worked with a guru, visited ashrams, and did so many more things to quit his addiction. He found the 12 Steps program to be the most effective, and as a result, he's been sober for more than 5 years and has gotten his promising career right back on track. I know you are going to really enjoy our conversation today because it was so down to earth. It was so real. It was so honest. And those are the best conversations that I love to have on this show. So let's get into today's conversation with Eric. Eric, welcome to the Happiness Happens podcast. Thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you.
Nice to see you. So I am really excited to have this conversation with you because we're going to talk about a lot of different areas of your story and your life. And I think it's going to be really helpful for my listener who may find themselves in a spot where they're trying to make so many changes in their lives, and maybe they feel like they've kind of always been beaten down, that life is not maybe working in their favor. And I feel like you're going to have a lot of insight to share there. But before we get too far into it, I want to ask you, what does happiness mean to you?
That's not you go straight for the deep end of the pool. I I think happiness for me, it starts with a reckoning of what is not happy for me, and just
Ooh.
like acknowledging that there's things around me that do not make me happy. And everyone's goal in life is to achieve some contentment, some meaning, some happiness. Like that's why we're on this planet, to live and to breathe, and it's our deepest purpose. It's the star in all of us that is craving for. I could never achieve happiness until I dealt with what was making me unhappy, and a real honest reckoning of it. And with that, you can obtain some peace in letting go that allows you to go deeper into that purpose, that star.
Love that. I have asked this question a lot. We're 200 and something episodes deep on the podcast, and I've asked this question a lot, and I've never had that response. And I think it's a really key point in that, in search of something that's maybe quote unquote greater or better, there's also a lot of letting go. There's a lot that happens on the back end that people don't necessarily talk about.
I think that, like, life, everyone's life is some form of a Greek tragedy. We all go through these intense sufferings. And And ironically, I think one of the greater sufferings is to never have suffered. I mean, there are people on this
Huh.
planet who have never been challenged. They've never had to dig deeper. Everything's been given to them. It's still given to them, and they seemingly live this blessed life of eternal happiness. And I
Hmm.
can't think of a greater curse than to have never had to overcome the struggles. And I can't remember what you said and why we're part of my thinking is it's very like attention deficit, either
Mm.
enhanced or disabled. So I have
Hmm.
no idea what you asked. But
I didn't really ask anything. I kind of just had a thought and then you had a response to it. But that said, you are a top trial lawyer. So you've seen your fair share of, I'm sure, like really incredible, maybe in a positive way and a negative way, situations, scenarios, people, and all kinds of things. And I was going to ask you, you know, all of these people that you cross paths with and all these situations that you are in, when your life starts to fall apart, what do you see as the biggest impacts that has on your mental health?
well, let me back up a little bit about what you said about what I've seen,
Mm.
and I've absolutely seen the worst life can throw at people because I deal in trauma, tragedy, injustice. I've seen it all from a person who goes to bed, happy, having everything, and they wake up in a jail cell charged with murder, and they're looking at the rest of their life incarcerated for an event that just happened and never saw it. And I do a lot. Most of my cases are civil, where
Mm-hmm.
someone's just having a good time with their kids, and next thing you know, they're waking up 2 weeks later and they're missing a part of their brain. And
Wow.
in all of those settings, and in 3 decades almost of doing this stuff, I never cease to be amazed at the human spirit of perseverance and resilience is astounding. It is awe-inspiring, and even just thinking of it now gives me goosebumps because we all have this inner strength that we can tap into when things are like so bad. There's a part of us that wants to die, and some people actually go to I need to die, and now we're talking about suicide.
Mm-hmm.
And the tragedy of that, of course, is that there is a part of us that needs to die, but we don't need to die.
Mm-hmm.
That darkness aside, I see the human spirit when it's at its worst. It taps into this reservoir of hope and perseverance and strength that is inexhaustible. It's a reserve that somehow we can tap into it when we just don't think we can go any further.
Mm-hmm.
And what overcoming these hardships, when you do, it's not if you do, it's when you do, or when you realize that what you think you want or what you think is going to make you happy actually isn't there. It's something else, and you kind of achieve some in state of progress, hope, some ladder has been climbed. You look back at those times with like elder eyes and wisdom, that all of a sudden becomes a purpose for you to not just for yourself but to share with others so that we can make our community stronger.
That's incredible. And I keep thinking to myself, this idea of rehabilitation in some sense and drawing on your own story, which we haven't dived too deep into yet, because you've also seen your fair share of challenges in your own life completely falling apart. And I feel like there's this parallel between perhaps your story and, you know, a client that you may work with. That, do you believe, and maybe this is from a more of like a trial lawyer perspective, but do you believe that most things and most people should at least have the opportunity to rehabilitate in some sense of the word?
I believe very strongly in that. I mean, I cannot. If I had there's two things that motivate me. One is what we're talking about, and the other is like deep passion is what corporate America and specifically insurance companies are doing to us and the lie they
Hmm.
perpetrate and how despicable it is. That
Hmm.
aside, the other thing that I'm like eternally passionate about is this social experiment that we call incarceration, the criminal justice system, and how destructive that is equally. Because instead of looking at a human being and saying you're a good person that made a poor choice, because I tell you what, I have the ability to kill. I also have the ability to love deeply, and that's in all of us. We all tap into a rage and anger, and we all tap into happiness and generosity and caring. We need to feed that. We need to encourage it. And when you don't, and you feed the other side of people, you strengthen it, right? Whatever you feed, you're going to strengthen. And the science is in, the data is in. We know that punishment doesn't change people. And when you train a dog to come, you don't beat it when it doesn't come. You reward it when it comes. So why don't we do that with each other when we know that's what we have to do? And so every single human being, I pause because I think we can come up with examples of really evil people
Of course,
that,
absolutely.
right? But that aside, which is 1/10 of 1,000th of 1%, the Hitlers or the crazy things that they can do to stir up a mass of people to do unspeakable things.
Hmm.
Everybody has inside of them that star I was talking about, that goodness, that hope, that purpose,
Hmm.
that meaning. And I don't for the life of me, I don't know why we don't tap into that power. Instead, we have a fear-based thinking.
Absolutely. I agree with you. And I was reading a book, okay, and someone in their family was incarcerated. It was a like civil and criminal matter. It was a whole thing, okay? And he tells a story in the book. So I'm reading all these stories and I'm thinking to myself, "Oh my goodness, in every single one of these stories." So what he had done was he had interviewed a whole bunch of people. I think there was like 10 or 15 of them, people who had been incarcerated for all kinds of different reasons. And the theme that I kept drawing from every single story was if these people had only had the chance to learn in a different perspective or see something from a different perspective, they may not have made that choice to get them there, you know?
Yeah.
And it's such a sad thing because my views align with yours, in that I think that we should have the opportunity to heal and to go deep and understand the stories in our lives that have shaped our lives, and it impacts our mental health significantly.
And you would like to think 100% of the people walking the planet share this view, and I think we all do.
True.
There isn't a human being alive that doesn't believe in compassion and helping. It's a spiritual principle. It's a universal truth. It feels good to help other people. For some reason, there's a power structure in place that has created an ideology, a groupthink mentality that has now become generational.
Hmm.
And we have kids that are being brought up not to do good things, but to be abusive, to abuse drugs, to do violence, because they live in a state that is perpetuated. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, maybe that's crazy talk. I'm open to that possibility. But I think that there is an astounding amount of potential that is being deprived to a large group of our population. And all you need to do is look at the number of 100 billionaires out there. We're about to have a trillionaire, and that's a lot of money. There's like 1,000 millions in a billion, right? I mean, like you could spread that money a little more fairly. And I don't want to, get super distracted, but regardless of what life is throwing at us, and if you're caught, and by the way, going back to the criminal justice system, when you're talking about kids that have brought up in an environment that's not healthy or not showing them the right way, we are one of two countries that allow juveniles to be incarcerated for life and in fact executed. The other one's Somalia. And you're talking about kids that are impulsive and do rash things and their brain isn't developed, and we know that, yet our mentality is we're going to just punish you when they don't even know what they're doing. And the cost of doing that is so destructive to me and to you. And I just don't understand why we aren't using the money to incarcerate to help and to heal and to teach.
It's such a good question. It's actually something that I think about often. And, it kind of it makes me think too, are there ways that you can do something different and hope for a different outcome? Because
So
please
I'm
go
sorry
ahead.
for interrupting you.
No, no, go ahead.
You're talking about imagination, curiosity, and a new way of thinking. And we have
Yeah,
two 80-year-olds that are either of them are going to be president. And they are so tied to the past, right?
right.
That what they know and their reference for decisions is based on 8 decades of them living in a world that is not relevant to today,
Right.
and and spreading and speaking ideologies that are outdated. Like, we need 40-year-olds, 30-year-olds, 50-year-olds that are in the prime of their life in their peak creative stages to come
Hmm.
up with a new way. And instead we have this system, a two-party system, that is perpetuating old ideas that are not helpful to today's world. And we're in trouble. Okay, like, we are in deep trouble because the rift between everybody in this country, who we're all in this together, right? We're spokes on a wheel to do good and to be productive and to create a vibrant, exciting, strong country, is completely divided. And there's no unity and cohesion of let's work together to solve what we're dealing with. It's
Right.
attacking and blaming and criticizing, and I'm right, you're wrong. No openness to see what the other side might have as their truth that actually is true, but you're missing because of a bias, a belief, a system. And that's preventing our happiness
I
on
think
both,
so.
on both aisles, on both sides of the aisle. I don't care what side you're on. I think we have to have a reckoning, an honest evaluation of ourselves. And I'm really upset about what's going on in this country and politics and government and corporations, and just say, this is upsetting, but not go into attack mode of blaming someone for the problems, because the problems that we're dealing with today were created decades ago. This isn't something that just happened and we can blame Biden or Trump. Like, this stuff was put into motion a long, long time ago, and frankly is being fed by non-breathing, non-caring interests that are driven by money, corporations that have total control over what our governments are doing. I mean, it's there and it's open and it's admitted, and we see it every day in the news that that's
Hmm.
what's happening. But
Hmm.
we want to blame a Republican or a Democrat.
It's because I think people always want something to blame, though. You know what I mean? And on a human level, I think we're responsible for putting out the kind of change and the kind of goodness that we want to see happen around us, right? And so you get to do this every single day in your work, every talk that you get, every message that you get to share. But I think what happens is we have so many expectations of other people and how other people should be and what other people should do, that we don't always take the chance to look inwards and be like, are we actually living in a way that is going to create the change that we're expecting from other people?
Yeah, no, you're tapping into like a key to obtaining some measure of peace. You said a lot there, all of which is like spot on. And we have to let go, like an expectation, they say in AA, is a resentment waiting to happen. Expectation is a resentment waiting to happen. And there is a sense of looking at other people in envy and jealousy, or why am I not getting this stuff? Or blaming other people, that unless you can come to peace with that stuff and overcome it, you're never going to be able to climb that ladder of happiness, because you're never going to be enough if that's what you're doing to measure
Mm-hmm.
yourself by looking at other people. You're always going to come up short. You're never going to have all that stuff that's going out there, and that now we're tapping into the ego and these thoughts that go on inside our heads that take you down a spiral, a drain, and keep you stuck. And I don't know how you deal with that and overcome it, except when you feel that thinking, if it's a habit. I think there's logic and there's emotion involved in our psyche, right? There's the brain of what we would call logic, and then there's the heart, or the Other thing that's emotion. And most decisions are made at a gut level,
Hmm.
right? That's we know that. People make
Mm-hmm.
decisions at an emotional level, not at a logical level. And so when you're feeling that, whatever you said and you talked about, if you had the intellectual ability to recognize I'm having that thought, you can break the habit of that, and you can let go of your ego and your needs and your wants to just focus inward of what's going on here now with me. And you can break out of that really destructive loop. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. So when you found yourself in addiction, I guess, how many years was that for you?
How long was I sick?
Yeah.
I mean, when I was a freshman in high school, I fell in love with weed and alcohol, and I loved it. It was love it. It was instant. This is incredible. By the time I was late 30s, early 30s, late 30s, I'd lost complete control of any inhibition on marijuana, and I was smoking it. If I was awake, I was high. By the time I was 40, I had lost all control of alcohol and was an all day drinker. And by the end of the day, I was, hitting the hard stuff. And for 2 years, I'd lost my mind. I'd say I'd give it 2 years. I'd lost my mind. And to this day, you talk about overcoming stuff. I'm overcoming heartbreak with my family every day right now of how when they're just kids, right? I have two kids
Yeah.
and they're in this environment that is just they have no choice. They have no power. And that's set. We were talking about it earlier. The kids that grow up in an environment that I provided an environment, frankly, that despite my struggles, on the outside, I held it together and I was able to continue to work somehow. There's people that never had that chance. And those kids don't have the opportunities that my kids had. And those are the kids that we're talking about that need help. My kids need help. Anyways, so to answer your question, is there was 2 years where I was like out of my mind.
Yeah. But that's a long time to live in that way. And that's a really hard way of living to change. You know what I mean? Like
It,
it's very hard to break that cycle.
yeah, I was desolate. I was broke. My practice was non-existent, and my health was yes. So I was at a stage where either you're going to live or die. I mean,
Right.
that's where the desperation that it takes. Like a parent can't help their kid get sober.
True.
The irony of that is the more you try, the more you enable it, the more you help it, and that you got to cut the cord and you have to walk away and you have to let your kid just figure it out. Any
Mm-hmm.
addict, anyone you love for and care, you cannot help them. They have to do it on their own. I truly
Yeah.
believe that. And doing it on their own for me meant crawling into AA, and in that group, like there's 12 steps that on their own individually are just basic, what I'm going to call universal truths, spiritual truths. But it's the key, the genius of it is that you're doing it hand in hand with someone who's been there,
Hmm.
and they're not judging you. They're giving you the space to grow, and they're just there to hold your hand and to lift you up. And so anyone can overcome these things. I've seen it. I've seen
Yeah.
people addicted to meth, fentanyl, heroin, you name it, crack, overcome these things. But I do believe that I know it's hard.
Yeah. What was that pivotal spot for you where you decided that enough was enough? Like, what does that look like for someone who's stuck in this cycle of addiction and being sick?
The moments of clarity when you look back at sitting at a stop sign and you're looking and you don't know if you can trust your eyes because there might be a car
Mm.
there or it may not be, and you pull out and you're afraid because you're about to get hit, even though there's nothing there. Walking, I have two like memories that are really disturbing. One is I'm walking in the woods with my kids And I believe that there's someone out there to get us. And I have a machete because I'm, it's thick woods, and we're clearing a trail. And I tell the kids, take the dog and run. And I go charging into the woods to keep my kids safe.
Sorry, is this a real life thing that happened?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
I completely went to some really, like, you're asking, what does it look like?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I basically abandoned my kids. I was too selfish or too sick. And then when I'd see them, I'd show up and I'm stuffing them into a car and they're kicking and screaming because they don't want to be with me. Okay. Like this is real stuff. And I mean, the thinking was physical. I'm sure it was induced psychosis or some kind of craziness from just going too far. There's a point where you just let go and you submit to the chemicals, and it's how soon, how fast can I just obliterate any feeling? I mean, that's when you get to that point, like it's critical. And you reach this point where, when you wake up and you just feel like there's no feeling other than intense pain in your head, no energy, and you look in the mirror, and this is me living this, and I can't look at it because I hate what I see.
Right.
I know what that's like. And that's where I had to get to know that I had to live again. That star was coated in tar, and there was just a glimmer of light. It was barely alive. And I knew that unless I did something, I mean, I'm drinking and driving and smoking weed and driving and with my kids, and you just reach this point where it's like, this can't be me. I got to do something because I'm wasting my life.
So it's like that moment of clarity, that moment, that small moment of like awareness that
It was
completely.
yeah, for me, it was an out of body experience. I mean,
Huh.
not to be corny or anything, but I'm in a bar, my girlfriend's passed out. It's like a 5-day binge. And I'm in a bar, and I look down at my life and I see her and I see me, and I'm disgusted with myself. And I vowed at that moment, I have it to this day. I wrote down on a piece of paper, my goals, quit drinking, quit smoking, be healthy, be there for my kids, go to work, start working. And, it's hard though, because you can make that. The number of times I've made that commitment to quit is more times than I could count, and the
Yeah.
techniques I use to overcome it. And even after that, I was drinking at the airport that day, but there was like an intervention where I went and I was introduced to AA, and I've always been against AA, ironically. It's ordered by the courts. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, that's bullshit. Like, you can't force these people to go to some religious based, it stands against my core values of freedom of choice. And I was just dead wrong on that assumption or
Hmm.
bias. But that's how I got sober. I just went all in on it though. I remember also I made a promise to myself, I'm going to be the person that does this, because it wasn't lost on me that most people or a lot of people don't. But I made a commitment to myself. I will be that person who gets clean and sober.
I think that's absolutely incredible. Would you say all of these experiences, because you talked a little bit about how your practice like suffered, and of course, I mean, of course, eventually, like I feel like you can keep going for so long, and then eventually you can't anymore, and so everything kind of falls apart for you to rebuild it back again. Would you say that the experiences you've had have made you a better lawyer?
Unquestionably. I mean,
Yeah,
it's like, that's a rhetorical question.
yeah, I do.
I mean, you know that overcoming something like that opens your palette of appreciation for life, not just for yours,
Hmm.
but for others.
Hmm.
And it stopped me. We get so judgy, and we get so like, you brought this on, or it was God's will, or some thought that creates us to judge others for the bad things that happen to them, as opposed to what we were talking about before. Good people make poor choices that can come out of control and spiral really quickly. And until we shift to a community, a society where we really want to help each other and understand, which we're polar opposite of that. Right? We're not in a space where we want to understand and help. We are in a space where we want to blame, criticize, and attack. And
Hmm.
until we get to a place where you can see the world I believe, I mean, this is opinion, right? Where you overcome something like I've overcome, and you can look back and you can look at other people and feel great empathy. I may not agree with what you're saying or who you are or what you do, but I have empathy and I understand you and I respect it for who you are. I
Mm.
respect you and I heard you. Until we get to that place, we are in deep trouble. And I don't think it's complicated. And that's what makes it so maddening for me.
It's so true. And I think that's really incredible. And I keep thinking to myself as you were saying that, how the type of work that you do is really challenging, and there's stories and there's two sides to every story. There's always two sides, right? And when you're sort of defending someone whose life is like on the line in that way, I think it's a really key thing to have that type of empathy and compassion and not going into it with judgment, because they're relying on you for help, and I think it's when we stop caring about the person that's in front of us, that's when change sort of stops happening, because we're not approaching situations with that greater understanding. Like you were saying earlier, we're just kind of approaching things with a bias that already exists,
And I
which is
think
not
that,
fair.
yeah, no, you're 100%. And to get specific with attorneys, maybe even doctors and a lot of professionals, like my profession has lost that. It's lost that capacity and empathy, and it's become this marketing machine of, and it's a system, by the way.
Oh
Like
yeah.
public defenders and lawyers are thrown into a system that's just burn and churn. It is
Mm-hmm.
completely insensitive. And there's guidelines, right? There's not even the option for judges. I can't think of frankly, a worse job than some of the judges that have to just follow guidelines. And
Exactly.
I mean, we're talking about some crazy stuff here. If people understood and heard what these guidelines are and what happens, and the inability for the system to look at everybody in a unique way as their fingerprint and say, what can we do to help you? We are cookie cutting guidelines, how long they sit in prison. It's whacked.
It really is. It honestly is. And I've always been so interested in the law and the system. So I live up in Canada, and I can imagine it's probably no different than it is down there. I think there's obviously there's nuances and there's differences. But when I first went to college, I was in a criminology program, and I wanted to be a lawyer. And then I sat through a trial, and I was like, this is not for me. I don't think I could handle this, because like knowing and believing in something so deeply, I don't know if I would be able to sit on the other side of that and hear, an injustice for someone that I don't know. It's so tricky.
Well, yeah, I mean, your fascination with the law is evident, right?
Hmm.
You got a nice curiosity to that, because I think you're tapping into deeper issues that we need people to critically look at.
Mm-hmm.
And the life of a lawyer that cares, and you would care because you saw it, you don't know if you can deal with it. There is nothing more humbling or humiliating than being a lawyer, because you put it on the line. I do. I put it on the line. I believe in what I do.
Yep.
And then you get rejected and you lose, and you watch something horrible happen to the person sitting next to you, where they break down and sob, and the parents or the people, I mean, like, you're talking about life-changing decisions that are made in a moment based on a group of people. Now it's getting scary because there's no trust in the system anymore. And so we have people coming together as a community to decide justice, 12 people, or six, whatever, a group of people as a jury. And you never had a lot of control or understanding. Like, it's a cheat game of chance. It really is. That's the harrowing. I don't want to go
No,
get
it's true.
derailed.
And also, I mean, money talks, that put two and two together. You know what I mean? Like in some
Well,
cases.
and that's the other, right? The ability to hire someone like me, and it's not lost on me. And that's one of the greatest guilts I carry is I was a public defender for 11 years. There's nothing I
Oh.
am more proud of than that work I did, is just going into those courts and just giving it everything I had for people who didn't care. My clients could have cared less about their life. They'd given up. They blamed me as a public pretender. I'm one of them. I'm part of the system. And I'm dealing with prosecutors and a judge that, are kind of autonomously just rolling through numbers. And I just showed up and did it. But I have reached a point where I get to choose and do what I want that allows me to live a life that I want. And so when you say that money talks, and someone has the ability to hire someone like me, that's an injustice because I can do things that other lawyers can't do. And I've earned the
Exactly.
right to charge more than other lawyers. But you know what? The person that has that ability to hire me may very well be the person that should be least like morally, ethically from a society. Like, why should this person receive another benefit?
That's right. Exactly. Exactly. And I imagine too how different people's lives would be if they could also afford whatever it is the
Yeah.
rate is, you know?
Yeah, because the level of skill and commitment and quality in the legal profession is it's shameful.
Mm-hmm.
There's lawyers that don't care. That not they're not qualified. They're taking cases because they have to keep the lights going.
Yeah,
They don't know how to do that case.
exactly. Exactly. What would you say is one way that you take care of your, mental, physical,
Yeah.
spiritual health, even given all these things that you
I
deal with on
force
a day-to-day?
myself to walk. I
Oh.
force myself when I'm tired, I don't want to do it, to get out into nature and connect with the dirt, the
Mm.
trees, the sounds of the birds, the milky light of the moon, you name it, like getting lost in flowers. Like I have to do something to disconnect because it's hard. I could work right now. I'm in a phase where I could work 16 hours a day and I'm not going to be done. And you can't just leave the office and turn that off. You come home to your family and you're spent and you're not available for them. And that's tension and stress because they don't, no one could understand that from my family's perspective that like, you know what I mean? Like the
Nobody
ability
knows.
to empathize only goes so far. And so
Exactly.
I have to make a conscious effort to care for myself. And to me, it's walking.
I
I
love
think
that.
I think walking is like the magic juice for life.
I agree with you. I always find that when I love to walk also, and I always find if I'm stressed out, if there's anything going on in my life, as soon as I go for a walk, half an hour, it doesn't
Yeah,
matter. That's that movement. It's kind of like it's like a walking meditation almost.
it
It's
is.
nice.
Well, that's
Yeah.
the other part of it. It has to be intentional. You
Yeah.
can't walk to feed the anger or the stress that you're in. You have to walk to intentionally meditate and to let go and to appreciate your body. This is a vessel. I'm sure every other host you talk to will say that, and it's true. We need to take care of our vessel
Mm-hmm.
because that's going to affect our feelings and thoughts. And if it's so competitive out there that you need every advantage you can get. Why would you make unforced errors and self-inflicted wounds when there's no margin for that?
Mm-hmm.
It's a commitment. It's intentional. It's discipline.
I love that. This is my last question for you today. And it's a question that I've asked every single podcast episode that I've done, probably in the last like 3 years. What is one way my listener can create a little more happiness in their day, every day, starting today?
Well, I'm going to end it the way we started is what's making you unhappy. I mean that. And until we can have that reckoning, what's the thing you cannot talk about with
Hmm.
others? What is it that you are so ashamed of, embarrassed of, or so controlled of that you are not able to talk about it with other people because you are afraid of the judgment? You're afraid of what it'll say about you. That's what's controlling you. That's what's preventing you from being happy.
That is one of the most light bulb moment answers that I think I've had on this podcast. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I love that. Eric, I've loved our conversation together. Where can my listener find you so that they can connect with you?
Well, let me just say that you can only have a good conversation if the person you're talking about cares and understands and is having an honest conversation with you. And so I think you've got a good thing going in who you are and what you have and your essence. And so I appreciate you saying that you enjoyed the conversation, but it's a two-way street. I think if people want to get a hold of me, I mean, I'm in Port Orchard, Washington, and if you Google my name, Eric Fong, Fong, you're going to find me. And you can also have my cell phone number. It's 360-621-9557.
That's amazing. I love it.
You're
Eric, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much for tuning in to today's conversation on Happiness Happens. Be sure to connect with us and let us know what you think. Leave a rating and review of the show if you enjoyed our conversation. And remember that happiness happens when you're least expecting it.